And this is the thing that I know you've got the most to say about. Would you tell me how much you want me to do the preamble, or you can just launch in there? But Ari Emanuel on Vince McMahon. It's been widely reported that about a month after the TKO merger and TKO president Ari Emanuel claiming that Vince McMahon would be a major part of the company, Vince is already being marginalised within WWE. He is still current executive chairman of TKO Holdings, but it's been reported that pretty much all creative control has been wrested away from Vince and handed to Triple H on the orders of Emanuel himself. So, I can say more, or do you just know enough and let's do it?
Well, there's a whole lot of things going on here at one time. First of all, $9+ billion, which is by my gazintas double what the UFC was sold for. Like I've always said with Vince, I can give you my personal distaste for the guy and his predilections, but you can't argue with success, and he has done something that that no wrestling promoter before him could have ever envisioned doing. They didn't think in those terms. And, whether he just sort of fell into it or if he had this idea, whatever the case is, like he created something that nobody else had ever thought of. That said, the good with the bad, the yin and the yang. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday on the way down here, and Vince, took the business to stratospheric heights, hugely successful, $9 billion. Aren't many entertainment companies get sold for $9 billion. So hugely successful. And you can't argue with that success. But at the same time, when you look at it, the wrestlers are still by and large being treated, even those guaranteed contracts or whatever else, which is a huge improvement. There are still things that are still done as much as they were in the 30s, 40s, and 50s in this business. And to me, having survived the opioid onslaught of wrestling, the Holocaust that was professional wrestling in the 90s, and I don't say that lightly. When I put myself back into that mindset, that was a scary, scary time. It really reached the point where I think most of us thought, well, this sooner or later it's going to be my turn, right? This is what happens to wrestlers. You come into the business and you die. To me, I guess the best way that I can explain it would be like through analogy. If Shane Douglas goes to the WWF, and gets put in, we'll say, the semi-main event at WrestleMania, that is a life-changing single-day payday. In WrestleMania 3, I think the semi-main event made $250,000, and that was 1980, 88, 87. So that's a lot of money today. I have no idea what it is today, but if, how many people out there watching this, if they had the opportunity to make $500,000, $700,000, $1 million in a single day, a week or two before, you break a bone in your back or your neck, blow your knee out, something medical that the doctor says, look, dude, James, you cannot wrestle. I forbid you to step into that ring. Knowing that if you go to the office and say, Vince, I got to talk to you, something happened, and you're going to get coined, stamped, tattooed with either unreliable or injury prone. You will most likely never, ever ascend to that position again. So I'd ask all the fans out there, if this was your living and you fed your family, put a roof over your family's head like this, would you go in there and basically commit Harry Carey and say, well, okay, Vince, I'm taking myself out. And so I'm not trying to make it okay that wrestlers were self-medicating like that. I'm just giving the mindset of what it was. You couldn't go to the cops or your lawyer and say, hey, they're making, because they're not making you do it, right? You can literally take yourself out, but never going to get back there. And so, like, when you take and that's just one example, when you take those types of things and you see this conglomerate being sold for just ungodly amounts of money. I think I read one time that WWE was like the 4th or 6th most recognizable brand on the planet, which is pretty amazing. There aren't many people that are going to say, yeah, I'm just going to go out and, just off myself to make sure that I never get back to that position again. Again, not okaying it or giving it the green light or rubber stamp, but this is the reality of it. This is how we make our living. So me personally, I'd risk my personal safety for my kids, not just in wrestling. If somebody was running towards my family with a knife, I'd throw myself in front of them. And I think any parent would. So that's where it comes from. That said, being sold, the yin and yang of Vince, and there's a lot of positive stuff with Vince, and there's Vince the businessman, there's Vince the person, and I think that's where like my separation comes in. But let's face it, there's also a lot of baggage with Vince, and especially now we hear that the FBI is raided, and there's a looming indictment, is the way the media keeps putting it. I don't know if there's an indictment looming imminently or not. It does seem to me that right now there seems to be a political tilt in this country, that if you are on a certain side of the fence, I think Vince is, that you have a more likelihood of being the ham sandwich that gets indicted. Plus, we have just speaking as a businessman, if you told me, James, that you embezzled $1 million from your own company last year to pay for whatever, I'd be pretty reticent to invest my money into your company, or a company that has you as its figurehead. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but again, you can't argue with 40 years of success from WWE. My guess is this is a pendulatory thing. It's going to be, okay, here's Vince. We're sticking with him. He's the guy. He's the valuable guy to have here, because let's face it, he's the face of the WWE, right? And everybody that's a fan knows he's the guy that's behind it. So while they do this transition, my guess will be in 9, 12, 15 months, there's going to be Vince McMahon has decided to retire and go out and enjoy his life, and whatever. They're going to keep a nice, neat bow on this thing. It's not going to be it's just throw his ass out. But I can't see him being there long term, because in this day and age, with the allegations of what the money was embezzled for, and what the looming, again, the media's looming indictment says, that you can't be a publicly traded company and have somebody like that in a very high, powerful position that's allegedly done these types of things. So my guess is it's transitory. It'll be, while we smooth it over, we're transitioning from this to that. And it makes perfect sense to me that Hunter being named. I'm sort of surprised that his daughter wasn't. Maybe it's because of the same name.
No, she's long gone. She's long gone out the company now. She's entirely divorced from it all at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment, right. But it seems to me that Hunter, if you like Vince McMahon's business policies and the success, let's face it, Hunter would be the guy that you say, well, sat under that learning tree, and sort of divvy that off to him and Stephanie. So it wouldn't surprise me to see if Stephanie makes a return, but it would seem definitely to be the logical thing that to go to Hunter, because Hunter's been so instrumental in the back for 10, 15 years in that company. But I personally, and I've been wrong on a few things before, I can't see that publicly traded company, amalgamation, TKO, sticking with Vince McMahon 5 years from now and saying that, okay, this is why we have him here. A lot of baggage. And when it's your own company, you own 51% of the stock, pretty easy to say, I'm going to stay here. I've heard it's down to 14 or 16%.
16, yeah.
So, okay. So that's 49 and down. You're in the weak man position. And, but again, there's for every business, there's a PR, there's a side of the company that faces the public, right? That the public looks in and sees. And, Vince McMahon, for better, for worse, has been an incredibly successful businessman in growing the WWE. I just can't see long-term them wanting to keep him around. But also, like, from Vince's point of view, we always say in the business, like, okay, you got all this money, like, why not just go out and enjoy it? I'd want to travel the world. I'd want to go see the pyramids, do stuff like that. And Vince is a workaholic, so he'll stick around, I think, as long as they allow him to stick around, which I think is going to be a huge question mark as to how long that will be.
I'm going to mention a couple of other things and then going to bring it back to Vince. So one of the big stories at the moment in Wall Street with this TKO Group Holdings Inc. is that the stock was at a high of $105.50 on Tuesday, 19th of September. And today it's trading at just shy of 78. So that's a loss of just over 25%. Yeah. So Ari Emanuel, and some of this was made public, but I'll get to Vince in a second. But other reasons apparently why they're claiming TKO stock is down is one, WWE SmackDown's rights fees in the last cycle that was sort of finalized a few weeks ago was only a 40% increase on their previous payment rather than 50 to 70% that Wall Street were hoping for. And also, which probably makes less sense, is that obviously with the UFC arm, Saudi Arabia has just acquired MMA promotion PFL. Although in that case, it really is just nothing compared to UFC, but still, that may have spooked people. But one of the big things, and this is Ari Emanuel himself, mentioned Vince McMahon as one of the reasons why TKO stock was down, which isn't a great sign for Vince, was, apart from the federal investigations that we don't know what that's happening with at the moment, Vince owns 16.4% interest. Has a 16.4% stake in TKO stock, and he can sell it at any time.
Yeah.
There's no caveats for him to, go to the company and have to work it out or anything. No, he can can flood the market with stock, in theory, and make, at the moment, $2.5 billion, and then see you later, and then he can basically kill the rest of TKO's remaining stock by flooding the market. So that's I think that's one of the reasons why Ari is mentioning Vince McMahon specifically, and why they're almost afraid of him at the same time.
Yeah. Well, there is a reality to this, and let's face it, there is a history of this, not just with Vince, but with the McMahon family, right? Throw out 1 million shares, buy them back when it's down, with 16%, even though it's still in the minority, vast minority portion of ownership of the company, with no linchpins to have to, hold on to this for, there's no agreement with the company saying, rather than you just go public and sell this stuff, we can do that, or you have to do this or that. If you put that out there, that's going to dilute every stock that's out there. And if that's strategically timed, and Vince is a strategic person, he could really, draw, like right now, down what you said, 25%. What if today Vince just liquidated and threw it out there? Drops another 25%, God knows what, maybe even more, because then would that spur a sell-off? People fear, like, hey, get out before we lose everything.
That could be a bargaining chip as well, to get back into the company. Say, hey, if you don't bring me back in whatever capacity he wants to be brought back in, then see you later, so much value of the company.
Yeah, it's I'm sure with a $9 billion deal, there had to be a ton of really intense negotiations going on, because I'm sure the average person out there would say, well, why didn't they put some kind of, because most people, like in any kind of like a C-suite position or whatever, are going to have those linchpins. Hey, you can't dump more than, say, 10% of your stock at any one time or whatever, that they wouldn't have negotiated that. But Vince would have been in a position, like, once they offer that kind of money, he knows they really want it, right? Well, it's easy, and Vince is a salesman, right? Say, why would I do this to my own company? Well, there's a history of this with the McMahon family doing this. So the one thing I'll say about Vince, until he's in a hole, you can never write with exact perfection the next chapter of what Vince is going to do. He's, in some begrudging, backhanded way, there's a respect for me in that way, that he's able to keep, even in something like that, you say, okay, well, Vince is done. And then you hear that, and okay, well, this is another chapter nobody would have predicted. Just a sidebar away from Vince. I am still curious. I would love to hear what the fans have to say, because I'm curious to see. The UFC and WWE are two ships passing in the night. Like, they don't connect to me. I see my sons that are huge UFC fans. And, I always hear, hey, Dad, we're going to watch the UFC this weekend. In fact, they were doing that yesterday. Grew up loving wrestling. Their favorites are Edge and the Hardy Boys. But when they walked away from it, went to UFC, looking at my kids, I can't see them saying, and suddenly, okay, other than those guys that you mentioned, Hardy Boys and Edge, I can't I can't see them saying, hey, Dad, let's watch WrestleMania tomorrow. And I think most UFC fans, that is, I'm sure probably most of the people you watch in those jam-packed buildings probably at one point were WWE fans or WCW fans or ECW fans. And as they've gotten older, said, okay, this is, we're maturing and this looks a lot better. So it seems like a square peg in a round hole to me, these two things going together. I've heard people say that it's going to be so like Conor McGregor, right? His in-ring career, in octagon career, is going to be wrapping up fairly soon. But boy, he's one of those guys that really fits into professional wrestling, right? He has that larger than life personality, that charisma and magnetism. So is this like the retirement home for the UFC fighters when they reach that point? I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how the UFC fans take to that being part of it. And I think they're going to have to proceed carefully with that, because if it suddenly looks like we're just blending these two things together, I think it's going to water down UFC, and I think it's going to confuse the younger fans that watch WWE. But I'm sure they've got some kind of a plan in place. It's just still one of those things I want to keep an eye on and see how they do it, because it just seems like a square peg in a round hole to me.